Hello everyone, this is week 4 and the last in this present set where we've been looking at perspective in buildings, and I can hear some of you heaving a sigh of relief at that thought, but I have to say I have seen huge improvements and some great work from you this month, so really well done. Today I'm demonstrating the painting of our local church. I've painted this before, but today I've chosen to paint it from the back side. These are the colours that I'm going to use, and I'm going to have to try and make lots of texture marks as well with my painting. Right, so this is the back side of our church, and I chose it because the perspective on there is really good. And as you can see, and we've talked about before, I guess my eyeline was about here because the bottom of the windows are looking level, although not that one. And so anything beneath my eyeline is going to go up towards the distance. Anything above is going to go down. And the tower will actually recede, but only slightly. It's looking like the base of the church here is actually going down towards the distance, but as far as I know, it ought to go that way because it's going away from where I was standing, which is about here. But as there's snow on the ground, I think the snow has distorted the base of the church. So I'm going to put it the way I think it's going to look right in my picture. And you'll always have to sort of think about that sort of thing. I'm also putting a figure in, and that's me, in my big coat. Because as you see, it was a very cold day. I was thinking that I would make this a grassy area, but the sky is very sort of grey and cloudy, and it is all looking very cold. So I thought I would continue to paint it as a snow scene, and putting warmth into the church which will be a lovely contrast. I think the church, in fact, is greyer looking than this, but I like the way it's shown on this photo with some warmth in it, so I'm actually going to do that. I've painted it before a couple of times, and this is actually the front of it, and so you're getting lots more in the way of gravestones and things like that, but I want to do it the other way this time. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to have to make lots of texture marks. And to start off, I think I'm going to just give it, I'll start over to the left on the tower, and I'm going to give it a little light wash of a raw sienna. So hopefully that's going to show through and give me the warmth that I'm looking for. So a section at a time will work better because I want to work wet on wet here. So I'm now putting down some burnt sienna and letting it float in the base coat. On top of that, I'm going to drop in some, because obviously it's at a distance and I can't see the cobbles particularly clearly. In fact, not really at all. All I can see is texture. So I'm going to paint what I see, not what my brain is telling me. Making it a little bit darker this side because it's sort of further away, and giving some contrast to the colours that I'm putting down and creating a more sort of rounded effect with the paint. I'm going to just leave that for a second, but then when it's dried in a little bit, I'm going to go back and touch it some more, which is going to give me more texture. But before I do that, I'm actually just dropping a little bit of ultramarine blue in there to liven up that. I've gone over the edge there a bit, so I'm just picking that up with my dry brush. Right, okay, so I'll work on the walls first. There's a little bit of snow on the rooftop, but not a great deal. I'm using a round brush with a good point because it isn't a particularly large subject and I want to keep control as much as I can. So doing a similar thing as before, creating some texture by dropping this on but allowing some of that warm colour to show through. So I'm actually going to do a little section at a time and work through that way. Looking at where the darks are showing up more than the lights, which would be under the eaves here. It's getting quite dark. When we paint flowers and other subjects like still life and things like that, we tend not to touch it too much. But actually, when you're painting something that has texture, you can touch it quite a lot because that's what's going to give you the texture marks. So now I'm just, with the tip of my brush, dropping a little bit of water back on, not big droplets, but just little tiny touches to create some texture in that paint that I've just popped down there. And I can actually just drop a little bit more depth in here, I think. Right, a little bit more down here. All I can really see are different shapes. I can't see a great deal of detail, so don't let your brain take over when you're painting something that's at a distance, because that's just going to bring everything forward and it won't look right. But obviously the nearer the subject gets to you, the more detail you are going to see, but in this case I'm not going to see a huge amount. I'm not worrying too much if I go over the windows because they're darker and they'll go in last, and so I can paint over the top. Nice and dark under here, very dark. So always look out for your darks, they're going to help with your shadows and the perspective and getting the right shapes. Okay. Still feel it needs a bit more warmth in here. So it doesn't matter to keep on touching, it's going to be absolutely fine. And there's a flagpole here, so I'm actually just going to pop that in before I forget. So we're getting a little bit warmer this way. I'm not wetting the paper first because it's going to weaken the paint just that little bit too much. I'm using quite a weak mix as it is, but wet on wet nevertheless by popping one mix on top of another. All the time looking at the subject, looking for your lights and darks. Very dark little corner here. So wherever you see an opportunity to put a little dark area in, go for it. I kept my drawing quite strong so that you could actually see it, but normally I would just soften it a little bit more than I have today. So you can keep going back if you feel it's looking a bit weak. There's a bit that's jutting out there, but it's light, so I've left it and I'll pop that in a bit when everything else is a little bit drier. Right. It's a very lovely building. We do go over and because it's just across the road from here, we do go over and draw it from life and paint it from life, which is always a challenge but a very nice one. Right. This is a big brush, so it is holding quite a lot of water and paint, so that's something to look out for if you're using a big brush. It is going to, don't let it get too wet, but it's got such a lovely point. That's why I'm going for this one. Lots of depth under here again. And so these colours that are mingling together are actually making some nice tones. And lovely variations as well. can tidy up those windows when I come to painting them. You see what I mean about that shape? It looks way better because it's going off towards the distance that way. A little bit of blue in there, and a little bit of water to bring the lights back in and to give texture and shapes. So I've tried to get a little bit darker as I've come towards the foreground here. So I'm going to stop while I do that edge because otherwise I'll run out of time. Staying wet quite a long time, so it gives me time to go back in if I feel I need to. I am working quite wet. Right, so I'll just stop and do this end. Right, I've more or less waited for that to dry so that I can now put the windows in and get the sort of shape that I actually need. So I think I might use a little drop of Payne's Grey in with my neutral tint because I can see the windows in a very, very dark way, but there is a lighter surround to some of them, so I've got to use the very point of my brush to try to show that lighter little area that's around each window. So while I'm at it, I can put this little, I think this is meant to be some kind of cross up here. I don't know quite, I can't see it very well. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe that was a bit dark, so be careful about things like that. Hopefully it'll dry up lighter. Another one there. I'll leave the rooftops for now. A little bit of snow on the rooftops, but not a lot. I happen to know that this door is red because my husband painted it, but I can't see it red. It's sort of recessed. So these lovely arch windows have to go in. Can't see anything very clearly, so be careful not to allow your brain to take over and start putting in detail that you actually know is there, but in fact you can't see, because that will bring distortion to your pictures. You can see this one a little bit more. I can go back and put a little bit of raw sienna on the surrounds, the light areas, when this is dry perhaps. So I'm just sort of indicating the shapes that I can see without getting too detailed. It's got quite a bit of dark under it, so I'm going back in with that. So all the time looking at the subject. I am working quite wet. So I'm allowing the paint to run around a little bit more. So that's hopefully going up towards the distance, as is this, but not as much as that one. So you've got to look at perspective in your windows as well, and doors. This is doing something completely different. This has got sort of goldy, bronzy sort of shape to the top of the window with some inscription or something on it. And there are some markings around it similar to that. So loosely just indicating that. So don't worry if your colours start to run. It's going to look nice and it's going to make the church look nice and old. And not too perfect looking. It's dark under here. A little shadow. Okay. So now for the rooftop. Maybe I'll try my flat brush. Can't actually see very much in the way of tile. This is thatched and this is tile, but very, very tiny tiles, so I can't see each individual tile at all. So it's going to be dark, dark, dark under here. Let's get a bit darker than that, I think. A little bit of warmth in as well with the sepia. And then it's got a little thatched ridge here with little bits of snow on it, but not a lot. So you can, if you're working in snow with a snowy scene, you need to obviously leave white. So I'm just going to put in marks like this, which will indicate thatch, with some light areas between to create some snow as well. And then it gets dark, dark, dark here again. Pointy brush, because this is a small area, just to pop in a little bit more of this thatch. And snow. Shadow. Right, we're back to the cobbles again. Missed that bit. I think I'm probably going to go over time today. It's quite dark up here, which is good because it stops that from looking too dark. There we go. I'll drop some water back on there in a minute. Get a nice shape here. See, when it's dry you can actually bring shapes back a little bit better and pop a few more darks in. Right, so now we have a tiled piece of roof with a little bit of snow on. Dark ridge here. And I'm following the line that I've made with my pencil drawing. Drop a little bit of water back on there. And then we have to go back the other way a little bit. So there's snow caught between the crevices in the tiles. There's also some nice warmth in there, and it's blocking off the shapes, so that's quite good. It didn't end up looking too precise. But I need to darken this little top area here. And it's got some fancy bits sticking up, getting bigger towards this end because you can see it better. Don't know what they are. Just clever little fancy bits that the builder put in. So popping a few of these darks in now, when it's drier, is going to give it shape and make the lights look lighter. And there are some markings on here, but I can't see what they are. So I'll just pop something like that there. It needs a little bit of light just sitting, but I'm leaving some white areas in the glass and around for some sparkle on the glass. Right. Okay, so I'll stop touching that for a minute, I think. See what happens as it dries. But I've put the bushes in because that helps with the perspective, and part of it, just a tiny part of it, coming in front of the church so that it sends the church back a little bit. So look out for little tips like that, because that's always going to help to make it look real and to give nice perspective to whatever you're painting. Right, now I must just quickly finish. So I'm popping in these little gravestones, and there's a cross there as well. But the majority of the gravestones are the other side of the church, so I'm not seeing many here. And so a little rough bottom edge to them so that it's looking as if it's sitting in the snow. For snowy marks, I'm going to use Payne's Grey, I think. And just pop in some marks like this, but then softening the edges so that it's going to look like little ridges in the snow. smaller towards the distance, as we do with skies and clouds and things, but getting larger as you come towards the foreground here. You see different colours in snow as well, so if you want to reflect some of those colours back down, if you're painting snow, a snow scene, that could actually look very nice. But lots of marks here in the snow actually, and footprints. But you must soften this while it's still wet. Take more time than I am. I'm just quickly showing the technique here. I'm running out of time. And you can lightly go over anything that you've painted like this bush, because it's been painted a while and it's completely dry. I've got a lot of tape around here to create the shape that I wanted. But there is actually another bush here, but I'm not going to, I'll probably put that in a bit later, but not now. But I do want to just put a few grasses in, merely because I love doing it. Poking up through the snow. Little clumps of grass, and they look quite brown. It's not like this at the front, it's much more sort of cared for, but around the back you're going to see lots of bits of foliage and shrub and things like that, because it hasn't been. This will help to give some perspective as well by putting sort of few smaller grasses in. But that always looks quite nice and natural, and you do see grasses growing up around through the snow. I'll put that bush in because it's going to help with perspective, I think. A little bit of warmth into some of these gravestones. Looking a bit dark. That's better. I'll dry up all right. Now I need to just do something about painting the figure. And I'm going to go for red, I think. A little red hat. And a little red coat. So it's just a shape, basically. Dropping a bit of water back on that to give it some texture and shape. And the sort of little collar thing could go on a bit later, I think. Then I'm going to give it nice slim legs because it's me. Normally you don't see the feet, but because the foot's turned up, you can see a bit of the foot. Be careful about putting feet on because it makes the figure look ridiculous if you see big feet on there. Well, I think I don't need to do anything with that collar. I think it looks all right. I'm not touching the figure anymore, it's fine. So little work in that, but do put a figure in this week, or an animal or a bird or some kind of life in your picture, please, because I think it's going to make a huge difference. It just gives another reason for having painted that or drawn that particular subject. Right, so that's all a bit hurried, but I hope you understand the technique. Can't quite see where that's meant to go. I'll take the tape off and attach it. But there we are. There's my rendition of St Mary's Church, West Somerton, in the snow. And I will touch it up and put a few more bits and pieces in it to finish it off before I attach it for you. Just quickly talk about other things. I printed that off because to show you the perspective, if you wanted to put a figure in the foreground then and create a smaller building further back. So you've got to be really careful about where you place the figure and how large it is, so on and so forth. Maybe you'll find a photograph like I have with my granddaughter and the building in the back, because then the job is done for you. If you have to superimpose an animal, a bird or a person, then you've got to be very careful that you get that perspective right. I just wanted to show you this to see, so that you could see how buildings actually recede. And this is like a 3-point perspective because it's going that way. It's got an edge here which is sort of looking more or less straight at you but not quite, so it becomes almost level here. And then away down the street it's receding really well. So that is a good example of what you need to look out for if you've got more than 1 point perspective. And the eye line on here, I would say, is about here, because that's where it's starting to get level at the front on the flat bit. And then away and away. And obviously if there's a road or a pathway in your picture, you've got to recede that as well. That's you're looking straight at. So that's going to be straight head on, flat, and it doesn't recede or turn in any way at all. It's just looking straight at you. So be careful of all of that kind of thing. But that's a good example, I thought. As is this. And again, there are figures here. The whole thing is receding with the beach huts. A big figure here. Smaller and smaller still, and the same thing is going on. The eye line is about here, I think. If you look at something like this, where you can see all these planks, up, 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 down, 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 that one is level, so that's where the eye line is, okay? So look out for something like that in your photo. For something that's completely level, you'll know where your eye line is, because with a photo it's sometimes difficult to work out where it is. So anything above that's that way, anything above is that way, and it's going to reach a vanishing point. But also, when you're painting other things, you're going to have to look at how things recede. For instance, the fruit and the vegetables at the front are really large and you can see the detail, etc., etc. But as it recedes, you can hardly see any detail at all, and of course they've become much smaller. So hopefully that helps a little bit. So look carefully if you're working from a photograph. Try and work out what's happening first before you make a start, and then draw it carefully and work from there. But try not to labour over it too much. I think that's the problem with perspective. You can actually labour over it way too much. So as long as it's almost there, just go for it. Next week, and throughout November, we'll be painting lovely autumn things, berries and hips and leaves and all things with lovely colours. So we can all look forward to that. Have a good week, and I'll look forward to seeing your buildings and people or animals. Take care. Bye.